Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of No Bullshit Talks. And I am so pleased to be welcomed here today by Rodney Perry. And Rodney Perry, you're also known as King, right?
Yes.
And I want to be like, okay, so did you just decide to call yourself King? Because if so, what's that
about? No, it's actually it's a weird story that I guess my teenage brain kind of turned into something else. It's been a kind of a moniker that I kind of had attached to me since I was about in like sophomore in high school. And literally there was a song by Lil Wayne. And my name is Rodney, obviously. And there's not too many Rodneys. Rodney is very much a name that everyone has heard of, but don't know that many of them. So as children are immature as they are, the only Rodney that they know that to be famous is Rodney King.
Okay.
Yeah, which is a terrible, thing to kind of connect to me and my name. And Lil Wayne had a song called Mrs. Officer, where that was a line in the song, like Rodney King beat it like a cop. And they used to sing that song to me every other day. It wasn't like it was bullying or anything. It was like almost this moment for me to kind of like be in the spotlight. Hey, Rodney King, man. Like it was very childish. And they kind of carried away from house parties and moments like that to people just casually saying it to me. And so for me, I'm like, well, I got to redefine this. If I don't mind it, I was like, but I can't just let this be about this, So, so I made it more so a pen name to write under, to create under, and to mean more than just police brutality.
Damn. And there's me thinking, okay, this dude is just so up himself that he calls himself King. So
No. Yeah. I mean, no. It's funny, and it's funny because I think I get so many different energies about it. Like people don't know that that's what it is, but I think it just matches a lot of things about me. I'm always usually in leadership positions when I was growing up, winning elections and being a part of particular teams and all these different things. So it fit. It didn't. I think that's why people kept it going, because it's like you are the organizer of the group. You are the one who's like leading us to get these things together. If you're the one who maybe, we may be late, but at least we're getting there.
Well, that's great. I actually love that story. And I think it's like really nice how something that could have been quite sad and traumatizing, you actually turned it into something super positive, which is an insane skill to have. And I think that if everyone could do that, the world would be a much better place and much easier to live in, for sure. So
I agree.
I am so glad I actually asked, because that's a great story as well to hear. But you're a digital creator and entrepreneur, and so obviously that's why I thought you were a great guest on the show, because most of my listeners are kind of entrepreneurs and small business owners, and I found your story kind of inspiring. And so I want to hear basically, your journey and how you decided to get into entrepreneurship and how that all started.
Well, for me, honestly, I feel like I've been kind of dabbling in digital creation since for the longest of times. Literally around that same time, talking about 9th and 10th grade, there was a particular app called online application called Picnic. Which I believe, I'm not sure if it was an internationally kind of app, but essentially it was a photo editing app that basically gave you a lot of things to do, which these days, anything that's photo editing is usually you're getting the basics and you got to pay for all the cool stuff. But this one really gave you all these different effects, all these cool things. And this was in the MySpace days. So people really would, that was when people were trying to really get creative and try to be different. They wanted their profile pictures to be very specific and very like personalized and to match their profile. So it's like, I want you to make it look blue and then make it look like it's raining, or make my eyes look big and all this, kooky stuff. So I literally just started doing that for people. And then I just picked it up. I just picked up learning all these various things, really getting the kind of, very much a backdoor way of learning the elementary ways of design, learning how to crop this, make this, to move the background for this, all these types of things. And it just transformed into me being even more enterprising about it once I got to college. Once I got to college, as as anybody who's ever been to any university or college institution, there's campus events and campus elections. every year. So I had the thought of like, well, what if I run a sale? And so I did like an $80 sale where you could get basically 2 flyer designs, a button design, and I think I threw in like a banner for extra $20, a banner design for extra $20, to just basically make up your whole campaign aesthetic, and just for just $80, you know. And what's crazy, it really was cheap because so many people came to me and like booked me for that. And I was basically coming up with their whole campaign. They came with no ideas. They just knew they wanted to run for something that had maybe a slogan or a color. And I'm like, okay, so what else, you know? And I would literally have to fill in the blank for so many people. I was literally like the art director for like the mini art director for so many people. And I was also campaign managing for people too. So I was just always in this organizing space and place. And I think I've always been able to speak both languages pretty equally in terms of like business acumen and being organized, but also being creative. And I think I've always presented that in either space. If it's a more, you know, corporate business space, because of how I show up and how my mind works, I'm always the one kind of bringing the flair, bringing some aesthetic, bringing something that's creative into this real stuffy, more business oriented space. But when I'm in spaces that are very eclectic, very eccentric, very creative, I'm the one that's tightening it up. I'm the one that's making everybody come out of the clouds and to the ground to something that we can actually do, you know, which still ends up working out. And I think a lot of people don't know how to speak that language to creatives all the time. Like you don't have to you don't have to kill their dreams, you know, and tell them, hey, this is something that you can't do. It's like, hey, sounds like you want to do this. What about this option? Instead of it being like, that's crazy as hell. Why would you want to do something really grand and crazy? It's like, it's possible, but it's probably going to be possible this way because of the budget and so on. You got to make it make sense to people. Because if you can't just kill the dream without at least working through as to why this can't happen. And a lot of people just don't believe into it, don't want to give the money to it, don't want to give it the time of day. And so I moved to Chicago. After graduating, I got my degree in marketing at Clark Atlanta University, historically Black college here in the U.S. And essentially left, went to Chicago, and kind of just started doing it part-time. Once I had gotten to the real world, obviously that took priority more than anything. But in the midst of that, I also started my own podcast, the Simply King podcast, and became an outlet for me, but it also became my way of honestly keeping my skills sharp on just editing and just being creative and also connecting with different creatives. Because if I don't have the time of day to kind of do this all time, full time, and really create an infrastructure that makes sense for this to be my full-time gig, this is my way of still staying in it. Communicating with really cool people, having great interviews, scheduling these things, planning these things out, something that I've done. For anybody who's been listening to me for years, knows that I literally create a different cover art for every single episode. And I'm almost at 200 plus episodes now.
That's a dedication, absolute dedication. I mean, as someone who's, still new to the podcast world, I do that, but it's like, it is a lot of time, and I realize how much effort goes into like creating a podcast. And so it's incredible, the commitment. And I think that, what you're doing is so impressive. And I really relate to that story as well, how like accidental entrepreneurship, like that you just kind of did it at university, because that's the same as me. Like I went to medical school, and while I was there, I was like started tutoring, and that tutoring started turning into like giving my friends pupils, and that turned into an agency, and then it was like it all like kind of spiraled, and then I was designing my own stuff and designing my friends' stuff, and that turned into an agency too. So I totally get that, and I relate to it. But I'm just thinking as well, you were doing like campaign stuff. Did you never think about also going into politics then? You were basically creating their campaign. Like you could have been a actual campaign manager. I know that in the US politics is a big deal. Did that never cross your mind?
That's funny. I did not think to do it. I think I just enjoyed the process of it all, because I still have very much I have a perfect record for myself. I have my record with other people. Me being the campaign manager for other people has been it's been pretty moderate, which is funny because I've been able to understand exactly why I've lost all those campaigns. But majority of the ones I've done and been a part of, we've won. And I think I've always had a knack for speaking and being able to teach and being able to coach and teach people how to do certain things. Not only was me and my best friend, Jawanza Harris, who got his degree in film, he always had an eye for great aesthetics, while I always had a great way to just organize and kind of show people how to get something done. And so we used to honestly consult on the low for a lot of different things for people during college. And in our own microcosm, obviously, there were plenty of pageants and people didn't know what to do. And we really got them in shape, got them in order. Like, you could do this. This could be your theme. What type of dress are you wearing? This is how you can do this. This is how you can write this. This could be the song. And then the same thing with campaigns, with actual campaigns, just actually like, okay, if this is your message, how does this go with all these other things? So for me, people definitely presented that to me because they felt like it just seems like I was a shoe-in for those types of things. And people still say that to me now just because of podcasting, because of how I do research and how I kind of utilize that research to inform my opinions and present solutions. Very often on my podcast, when I am having kind of socio-political based topics and I'm talking to someone within that field, 9 times out of 10, the call to action is about some type of solution or some type of suggestion that could be better for the world. And I think a lot of people just enjoy hearing me speak about those things, but I have to put it in context that that's how terrible politics are, is that any good idea sounds like a great idea too.
Well, it sounds to me like you should be a politician. Like, I mean, come on. Like, it sounds like you've got the experience, you've got the success rates, you're talking about it all the time. Like, it sounds like this is your calling.
Look, I've gotten that a few times. I just don't. I don't think I align with the active politics. That's really what it is. Because
the bullshit behind the politics.
Not only the bullshit, but just the fact that I have to almost kind of like pick and choose when I can decide to be myself.
And
that's something that I've never really done. Like, I was to my friends and so many of my previous coworkers before I like kind of like really distance myself from corporate spaces. Everybody always applauded me for being the like least code switcher. You know, it's like, Rodney, you barely ever code switch. Like, you've been in meetings and we've heard you say main and and this and this and that and all that. Like, just speaking how you speak, we get it. It's not like you're misunderstood. It's not like it's not convincing. It's just amazing that you do it and that it works. Like, that people will actually let you exist in there. And I was like, I didn't even think about that. I didn't even realize I wasn't doing it for quite some time until people started to pick that up on me. And so I'm like, I wouldn't even know how to show up in a particular way where it's like objective enough that no one has any presumptions about me to just listen to what I got to say. Because I think that's how every politician shows up. They clean themselves up. They present themselves in a very objective way. Then they say things that are specific that may or may not convince you to vote for them or not. But if you show up in a way that they already got some questions, and I see how I know how I come. I know I got particular connotations and things that people can try to infer certain things about me until they hear me speak. And so it's like, if you wait just a second, then you might, be convinced. But if you already are kind of like, no, maybe this is an act. Maybe that's the act. The fact that he's speaking the way he's speaking.
Yeah.
I'm judging him based off of the appearance or whatever it is. But
everyone does that. Everyone's guilty of judging people by their looks. And like, no matter how much you say that you're not, you totally do. Like, what else do you have to go on when you first see some people? I'm absolutely fine with that. I admit it. I totally judge people by how they look.
Yeah, me too.
The difference is I don't hold on to that opinion once I get to know that person. So obviously you can totally misjudge someone, but it's the people I hate are the ones who, like, speak to you, get to know you, and they still hold on to that first initial judgment, regardless of how inaccurate that is. So I think that's what I have an issue with. I mean, but everyone, no matter what you say, everyone is so judgmental, and like people do just judge people from book by its cover. But I guess like it would be very inappropriate to have a politician on a show called No Bullshit Talks, considering that is all they're full of. So it's like,
you know what I'm saying? it's counterproductive, and I'm so anti so many things about how American government is just how it works. Like, I didn't realize how ageist I was until previous elections. I was like, damn, like we literally are sitting here choosing between grandpa and grandpa and great grandpa and greater great grandpa. And like, no shame to the elders by any means. I love old people because I believe they are truly, you know, they can teach us so much and show us how to like live our best lives at the, you know, in our golden years. But it does not make sense if we're talking about if every other 70-year-old that you know in your own family is comfortably at home, retired, and, you know, shooting the breeze, just want to see their grandkids and, you know, do whatever they want to do. They're not working, you know what I'm saying, 300 days a year and making literal decisions for millions of people on a consistent basis. Like, I don't think I get it's maybe a lot of mental into that, but it's like still, no, you know, like why that sounds like a really stressful mental capacity. Like, and you've been doing this for the span of like 20 plus, some people 30 to 40 years have been in politics. It's kind of like we need to freshen this up. We need to kind of keep it fresh. Like,
I get it. I think that, like, you know, as I like to think that, you know, those guys are experienced or whatever, but they have the knowledge and the many years of experience. But at the same time, these are the people who are going to be protecting the future of our country or whatever, you know, and that I would like to think that they understand what that future looks like and how to adapt to it, but they don't have that young person's mindset who are going to be the future. So how can they relate to those people who you're trying to create the country for? So I totally get where that's coming. And I mean, like, you know, there's so many new things coming out now, like there's everyone's talking about AR, VR and all AI and all this kind of stuff that's new technology. Do half of these people know what that is? Like, you know, I spoke to a bunch of people this week about, you know, Meta and the metaverse, and like half of them didn't even know what it was. And I'm like, okay, so this is like the future, whether you agree with it or not. I'm still up in arms about it. I don't know. I don't know enough to be able to decide whether like I want to even get involved. But like, at least I know it exists. I know what it's there for. I understand. I'm reading about it. Like, whereas I feel like, you know, some of these people have been put into like making decisions about our future don't even know what the future is and what's going on, and they can't relate to young people who are the future generation. So I totally see where you're coming from with that, which is really interesting. But like, I love the journey though. I love how random it is. But what you also said is that you started a podcast back then. Like, that's what you said 7 years ago or something.
Yeah, it was 2015. Yeah.
That's mental. So for me, I started a few weeks ago. And so I'm a right podcast noob, right? And I'm one of those.
And you're already doing great.
Well, thank you. I mean, I'm still learning for sure, but I see now everyone's got a podcast. That's why like everyone's like, oh yeah, I got a podcast too. And then I look and they've got like 2 episodes and they just stop because everyone just realizes it's a lot of work. And I'm learning that now, and it's so many hours a week I'm putting into it. Like, so you have to find guests, you have to like, you know, vet those guests, you have to like then record it, then you have to like wait back for it and edit it, plus all the research you do on them, then like, you know, the video clips, the audio clips, the social media promotion. It's like, oh my god, there is so much to do. And I think people just think, oh, there's no point, but you've been doing it for that long. You did it years ago, and I swear now it feels like it's so easy to do. Like I said, everyone has one. There's loads of platforms you could just do things to, but 7 years ago it can't have been that easy. You must have been one of the first few people to have actually run a podcast. And first of all, huge, insane congratulations for the fact it's still going. That's impressive already. But tell me through how different it was starting a podcast then compared to now.
It was a lot more. It was a lot less color. I'll say that first. It was a lot less people of color who were doing podcasts at various levels. We're not even just talking about from an independent standpoint, but even for people who were already had established communities and personalities online. They didn't have, it wasn't that many people who had podcasts. And the way to the kind of barriers of entry were a lot more expensive too. We're talking about having to have actually, like you had to have a mixer. You had to have certain things. Like now we have like Yeti mics and USB mics and all these various options that are way more economical. So you could definitely start a podcast with, you know, with less than $200 these days. And you'll be right on your way. If you got the time, the energy, you can invest that quick and be up on the road. But it was a lot of things that you had to go through, from getting your, you know, URL feed and posting to these particular same, you know, kind of traditional things like the Apple Podcast and all these other various places. Spotify wasn't even doing podcasts when I started the podcast. Google Play was something that no one really cared to use. So many different things did not exist. So many different platforms that did some type of form of audio did not have podcasts as an option. Apple Podcasts and SoundCloud were really the top two ways of doing things. I believe about 2 to 3 years after me even starting my podcast, SoundCloud almost like went bankrupt. And that was literally where I hosted my podcast and like distributed through to all these other various places. So I'm like, damn, okay. I didn't know that I was in risk of losing all this data and all these different things. So here we are. Analytics were terrible back in the day. Like you didn't know, like Apple Podcasts, still to this day barely shares particular analytics. You literally have to be one of those, top ranking podcasts for you to get any real true information out of them. There are the tactics to, chart and be newsworthy and to push your podcast and promote your podcast in particular ways were very different back in the day. Because at that time, social media just really, the education around podcasting, especially if you had a particular listenership that you were trying to gain, especially if you're a person of color, that's already a fresh new thing. And if you want to get other people because you're making relatable content about you, your life, or your perspective, that means you want other people of color to listen to your show as well. So, but the thing about it is that unfortunately, the majority of podcast listeners were majority white. So they already knew what podcasts were and they either entertained them or not. And the podcast genres were certainly long. There was something you can find of something. But the majority of the time, if you ask somebody, hey, do you listen to podcasts? They were either going to bring up Serial or This American Life or some other murder podcast. And that really be it. And maybe Joe Rogan of all people. Mm-hmm. That may be it just because they were the only ones who were dominating the particular space and people were connecting them to podcasting. But in 2015, there were a handful of podcasts that were, really making their ways. You had the For Color Nerds podcast, The Read, you had the Comeback Jack show, you had several shows on NPR that were based in, actually talking about race. And then it kind of, because of the money, because of the deals that people started to get, the advertising dollars, and the advertising dollars being crazy stupid from a standpoint of, if we're talking about keeping people's attention, that's something that is data that you really can't beat. The same way when it comes to, YouTubers and things like that. If you can get somebody to sit here and watch a YouTube video for 3 hours, then you're gathering so much of their time and so much of their data too. So that's what made podcasts such a viable source of investment. And that's why so many different companies start to pivot and create different departments just for that and making their own original podcasts themselves. And that's when things started to boom. But also, too, it became a lot easier. Things like Anchor came up and all these different things, really easy ways for you to literally, in one day, set up an account with Anchor, do all these particular things, get all these particular processes, all these various communities and resources and conferences started to pop up. So it made it a lot easier. And for me, my process started to get, because I was there prior to the change, I just adjusted with the times, changed, found a better, more stable podcast host, sharpened up my methods on certain things, and opened up myself to, having my process to be sharp and being able to do certain things. Like getting guests was definitely a hard thing at first, asking so many people, and honestly, consistency is the hardest part. I think
that's what everyone said. Everyone said that. It's
consistency.
It's like, how do you, first of all, it's like, everyone starts a podcast with like doing everything and everything, and then like, you're not really talking to anyone that way, you lose your kind of audience, and also just like the same, as I said, consistently do it. Like as soon as you stop momentum, you kind of drop out. I think it's the same with lots of things, but you mentioned so many great tools and different things. Like, so to anyone now, because I think, as I said, everyone I feel like is starting a podcast. And so what advice would you give to people who are starting a podcast now? How would they make waves with their podcast? And I think in some ways, like I said, it's way easier, but also at the same time now it's way harder, because there's a massive sea of people out there. Like, how do you differentiate your podcast and make noise and get that seen amongst a sea of like a million podcasts? Like, what would you recommend to people?
Two things. Being consistent is really based on how you frame and format your show. I'm a firm believer that you have to consider what the commitment is that you want to present to your listeners, and they'll commit to that commitment if you establish it to be that. They won't hold you accountable to anything that you don't say. So if you want to have a show that is weekly, then you got to do the work to make it a weekly show. If you want to have a show that is bi-weekly, monthly, whatever it is, make sure that that's something that's clearly said, that's clearly known, and so that people aren't waiting for you or don't think about you. Because you may actually get people to subscribe, enjoy your content, and if they know that this is only something they're going to get every other week, not in a high frequency, then make sure that you're producing something that is actually quality and gives them a lot to do. I highly suggest if you do something on a bi-weekly basis to make it really dynamic. It doesn't have to be long, but make it dynamic. Put the sounds, put all the things, put all the bells and whistles on it to make it extremely stimulating and entertaining. Secondly, I would say just so that you can stay consistent. I feel like that's what you have to do. You don't have to bet on, what your bandwidth is. Once you start the planning of a podcast and you realize like, oh, I got to do this again. And then I got to do this again. I got to do this again. Make it make sense. Batch content is a great way to go about it. For me, it took me maybe around like 4 years to finally be like, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to go on hiatus for like a month so I can reset. And like some people wouldn't do that because they feel like that would break their momentum. In most cases, people might take the Christmas holiday off and come back in maybe 2 weeks and, be right back on business. But I think that I feel like people are comparing themselves to people who have so many resources. But if you're a regular person who has a job too, and this is just something that's your passion right now that you would love to become more, but you want it to be good and you want it to be quality, take your time. This is your shit. Like nobody's gonna make you do anything that you don't want to do, or if you don't have the space to do, and it'll come out in your content too. It'll show that you really aren't into it, or you're really just going through the motion or just phoning it in. So don't be like that.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's the same with everything, right? Like you take a break from life. I feel like as an entrepreneur, it's so easy to just be go, go, go all the time. And I think that, especially if you run your own business, like you feel like every minute that you're not working on your own business is like a minute you're not earning potential money, and you make yourself feel guilty as a business owner. But what you realize, and it took me years to realize it, don't get me wrong, I was definitely an all-nighter person. I'd be like, doing this and be really productive. But I'm realizing I'm actually working at 30% capacity probably. In reality, I look like I'm doing a lot of work, but I'm not. But the moment I ever go away, I have a great weekend where I just switch off and do nothing. I am so buzzed when I get back. I am like 10 times more productive. I'm like, wow, the value of taking a break is absolutely insane. But it's taken me like 10 years to get to that point. So it's a slow journey. I feel like, but I feel like the same with the podcast. I'm trying to do it now when I've got the momentum, but already I'm realizing, oh my God, this is so much work, but I'm still sticking to it while I can. And I'm totally going to take a month off at some point. I'm going to nope, I cannot deal with any more podcast crap. Like, I'm just like, I'm going to take a break and like, maybe I'll look at the analytics, like you said, and look back at, what people have said about different stuff and maybe do more content that other people want to hear. And I think that's also super important. Knowing about that.
And giving space to just engage. What I did this past January, because I just take the month of January off and I just came back last week, is I'll just repost old episodes, clips from old episodes. Like just pushing the old archive is like your pages and things like that can still be very active with promoting your show. And that's something that you gain from consistency. Consistency will reward you, not just by way of retaining your listeners and, possible opportunities, but also the opportunity to create from something that you've already created.
Yeah.
Because imagine being a person who can look back into 100 some odd episodes and be like, can I revisit this particular topic? Like, you don't have to now stretch your mind and think like, I need to come up with something new. You already came up with something new 2 years ago. And is there more that you can add to that?
It's still relevant and it's
still
good.
relevant.
So good quality.
So many things I've said have came back around. And another tip I would say for newer podcasters is focus on solidifying 150 subscribers.
Wow.
If you focus on that particular number, just generalize it in that way. Like, and when I say focus on them, I want you to get to a level where you believe they've gotten to all the levels.
Why 150?
150.
Where's that number come from?
Honestly, it was a number I found it through research, just as a method to kind of, come out the door swinging and being able to really be able to push your things. If your goal, which I believe everybody's goal is to create whoever is following you to become advocates of your brand, of your content, of your things. And advocates truly are people who they're past being your mouthpiece. They are not only just sharing it, they've already bought things. They've already came to the live shows. Where anything the podcasters do, they literally are your biggest cheerleaders because they do it without even the mentioning of you.
That's
they
the
will
story.
always talk about you.
That's the theory of 100 true fans, right? That's the thought I thought it was like. So you've just made like 100 true fans just 50% more difficult. That's what it sounds like. So but create your own measurables for that. Is that okay?
If you know that they are, that you have them by the time that you get an extra layer of contact with them. Maybe you finally get their email, finally get their number, finally get a way to know exactly who they are. Maybe they subscribe to your Patreon. Maybe you find a way to connect with those people, get their name, be able to talk to them directly, and be able to also present things to them directly, exclusive content, merch, whatever it is that you kind of do to, keep people giving them value. If you focus on a smaller number, which in the grand scheme of things, 100, 150 sounds like a lot in the grand scheme of things. But in reality, when we're talking about podcasting and how big and how grand and how big the internet is, that's truly very much a small portion of people. But if you have that on a consistent basis and you're able to make them your advocates, now you have 150 people who are sharing your podcast, who are talking to other people about your podcast on a consistent basis. Because in the meantime, you're still going to capture other people. But if you're worried about just capturing those 150 and just satisfying them, you'll ultimately, gain a lot more from it. And that's kind of what I believe is the best way to approach it. Instead of sitting there thinking like no one's listening, no one's whatever. It's like, no, measure your success of your episodes based off of how many of those 150 people keep coming back.
I love that. That's
even
great.
If you don't know who they are yet, because then once you know who they are, now you can solidify. Now you can know for a fact, like I know it's Jesse from Wisconsin who listens to my show all the time. I know that it's Jamal from Brooklyn who comments all the time and listens to my show. I know that. And imagine if you can make that a true community where these people are truly advocating for you and supporting you in whatever way. We've seen it on so many different podcasts. People who have great communities are able to do way more because they're satisfying and really speaking to really a smaller group instead of the world. And then people feel like, oh, what is happening over there? What is happening with these people? I want to know. I want to get into it. And they invest in you. And then through that investment, you improve the quality of your show. You improve the quality of your guests, improve so many different things. So I think that that's the biggest part about it, is making the biggest splash and just honestly just producing great content at the end of the day.
I love that. All of that. I think it's a really good piece of advice for loads of people out there. So I think hopefully they're listening and they're going to try and implement this and work out who those 150 true fans are going to be. I mean, I certainly can't imagine that yet. It's something for me to think about later. I'm going to work on the consistency first. That's the first step. I got to be consistent, get a lot of stuff out there, then I'm going to think who my fans are. But I definitely want to bring up something because, I've heard you talk a lot already about race and the fact that you're a black guy doing this and the difficulty that has caused. I find that things are more open these days about race, but it's still such a dividing topic. I still think that so many people are very, very uncomfortable as soon as you bring up anything to do with racism or that sort of stuff and inequality. And I know there's a lot of push out there at the moment about DEI and people are doing these things because it seemed to be the right thing to do, and companies are involving all this stuff, but no one really understands it. And as soon as someone of color starts talking about real issues and the adversity they face, it becomes awkward, and I find that that's a really divisive topic. You talk a lot about this on your podcast, right? You talk a lot about racial issues. How has that gone down? Because I feel like it's great that you are talking about it so that people who identify with this will have someone to listen to and some advice to have. But do you ever find that it's a bit alienating to some people and controversial? How do you find talking about such a risque topic on your podcast so openly?
For me, I think it's always been a part of my casual conversation. And I think for me, I think I committed myself to my creative process to always talk about the things that I'm comfortable with, the things I feel very prepared to speak to. And in all honesty, easy hack to continuously always and consistently talk about race is just speaking the facts. Just you can take a lot of the back and forth and the emotion out of a conversation about race when you just present facts. Where I'm not tailoring these to fit any particular opinion of mine. I'm not trying to make it sound better to you. I'm going to just tell you this is what's happening. And however you feel about it is however you feel about it. It's a way that I've always approached that particular conversation publicly, especially because if we can sit here and say that, hey, there are Black people being killed by police. Why? You pay the police to do this particular thing. Also, too, I paid the police to do a particular thing.
No, what if they say, because a lot of those people will just be like, well, those Black people are actually doing something wrong. They're not killed because they're Black. They're killed because they're criminals. So that's what they'll, and then they'll get annoyed because you're bringing race into it. And do you not think that will then fuel other people's anger that you're blaming this stuff on race rather than seeing things like, because there's that danger, right? Is that like you've talked about, obviously the whole George Floyd thing, was very controversial, huge on social media, and everyone talked about it because he was a Black man, but then everyone was like, oh, he was a criminal, he did this, he did that, that, that's really why he was killed. And so obviously that causes really big imbalance, and I feel that it causes even more racial friction and tension. Like what do you not think that if race is talked about so much in that sense, do you think it will maybe have an opposite effect, and instead of bringing awareness it makes people be more negative towards Black people? Do you not think that might be an issue?
I think that just speaks to what the truth of it is. If you have an adverse effect to talking about the realities of what race is in the world, not even in the country that I live in, then it really says a lot about you. And the reaction is coming from a space of not wanting to accept a position or the complicity, how you're complicit within this overall thing. So even if somebody was to come back to me on those things, I would flip these things on them and say, hey, and which are still facts. You pay money for these things to happen. You can come and bring this fact in that a lot of people love to bring in, that unarmed white people are actually killed at higher numbers than unarmed Black people. The only thing is that the frequency of it with Black people is a lot higher. That's where the issue that a lot of people have is. But in terms of the amount of people, it's certainly, surpasses. So you should be mad too. You should be upset as well with the idea of police brutality, not anything specifically to do with race. We can keep it objective, and you still have a reason to be just as upset as me about it, because they're randomly killing people for no reason who look like you too. So why aren't you mad with me? Or is it really not about race? And just give them that question. Because if you say that all these things are not about race, how come everybody isn't on the same page that police really do need to be scaled back, reformed in all these various ways, because they're killing all types of people at a rate that really doesn't make sense. So if you want to kind of like debunk all these things that I'm saying, tell me, how are we not still talking about race? Because you're not upset with that, and you have all the reasons to, because more than likely you use these reasons to rebut everything that people say when they bring up race in these conversations, as if, oh, well, we're dying too, so you should just be quiet and just die with us. And that's something that doesn't make sense to me. So for me, it's been helpful to be able to speak to these things. And our honesty through the George, honestly, I believe it was the situation with like Alton Sterling. I think it was in I want to say it was in 2016, when it was essentially the killing of Alton Sterling, Philando Castile, and several other things. Like I think it was the Dallas shooting, it was a hanging in Atlanta, Georgia, that all happened in about a 7-day period in the summertime of 2016. And I did an episode basically just saying, America, just America being America. And just basically that was kind of my last time speaking directly to this particular phenomenon in society. And since then, I think I've pivoted to, when I speak about race, it's truly coming from a place of like constructive, solution-oriented things. because it's like, I'm tired of kind of rehash. I'm gonna do an episode every other week if I allow space for this type of things. And it does not feel good. It does not feel good. And it feels like this is the exact idea that they're wanting us to rehash. We never get to a solution if it feels like there's a refreshing the problem. So we have to like be a part of the solution. So for me, I want to continuously present, you know, Black and brown people who are doing great things to fight these particular things, being great examples of just business people and creators who are still living life, like just showing that life is still worth being lived. Because during those darker moments, like in 2020, like in all these various moments where the world is kind of mourning for this tragic thing that we all watched publicly happen, the thought process that a lot of people have and they had in 2020 was, well, shit, why do I have to have children? Why should I even do anything if ultimately this is how I could end up being a person who was minding their business? Because yes, you can go back and forth about the details of the man that George Floyd was, but none of those things matter because we have examples of everything. We have examples of people doing things right, minding their business, doing things wrong and minding their business, doing things truly out of harming no one. And still all those individuals ended up in the exact same predicament, being killed and slain publicly or even privately. Either way, it's still something that should not be happening. So for me, it's like, I'd rather just continuously show that the reasons why life are worth living. Life is still worth living, and show our humanity. Like the tagline of my show that I came up with, I think after a year of podcasting, is the soulfully conscious podcast for humans simply being humans. And if you listen and you go through my show, you see that I've spoken to majority women and majority Black individuals. And the reason why I'm saying all those things and not allowing race to be the thing that kind of holds the crown in terms of just what you think when you see my show. I always call my show a culture criticism show. It's because I want you to see the humanity in Black people and people of color as a whole. So if you genuinely don't get that as why that is a thing, then that's where I'm trying to get you to, because I'm showing you all these different people. So when I do have guests on who happen to be white, I give them room and space for them to talk about what I want to talk to them about and about them and whatever their particular interest is. But also we always end up talking about race, because I don't want it to be this situation where that dialogue isn't happening. And I know if you know me, and if they know how I get down and how I speak about particular things, I'm very explicit with all of my white friends and all these different things. And I think I have to be that way because I want them to know exactly what it is and what it isn't. Like I want you to be able to communicate with me in a way that is honest and true. I don't want you to show up and put on a facade because you think I'm your singular or cool Black friend that like allows for you to be cool with him. I want you to know, like, this is how I roll. This is how I think. This is what's going on. This is how I think about the world. And me and you can talk about these things. That I actually appreciate that. If you tell me what you're confused about. But the thing about it is, I'm that person. Don't assume that about every single Black person. Don't assume that about all these various things. You can't go and say and do what you do with me to everyone else.
I think it's great that you're positively spinning it. Like that's a really good thing. Like, you know, you're taking all the negativity around race and you're saying, look, this is what Black people can do. Like, here's all the great things, and then showing that sort of stuff. I think that's fantastic. I think that's absolutely needed. I think my worry is that, you know, the more people moan about it, the more then they'll get bad names. And I think the racism in the UK and the US is very, very different, in my opinion. And I've always argued a lot with my friends about this, because like they always go to me, oh, I don't know why you spent so much time in America, it's so racist. I was like, I got treated amazingly in America. Like most people loved me because I had a British accent and they just like were really nice to me. I never had a single problem with police. Police were lovely and respectful towards me. And for me, everyone was like, that's crazy. I was like, I had no racism in America, like that's on the news. And because obviously when it's on the news, it talks about like that is everyday life. It might be in some parts and it might be to some sort of people, but you know, I've obviously not been in those bad places at that bad time and just like had bad luck with it. But the difference is for me is that the racism, and this is just from my experience, the racism in the US seems more like it's brutal, it's more obvious, it's more like, you know, that sort of thing. But the racism in the UK is like the silent racism. It's like the judging people, treating people badly because they are of a certain color or, you know, certain sexual preference. You know, it doesn't have to be racism in that sense, or even gender, like, you know, you know, but they don't tell you why they're doing it. And I think that's so much more dangerous, in my opinion, because with the openly racist people throwing the N-word around and just giving, you know, what they're thinking, and you just can avoid those people. But the problem is, in the UK, I think there's a lot of people who maybe like that, but you don't know they're like that until it's too late. Like, I'll have heard some stuff, someone's told me, and I'm like, oh my God, that's what they think. I had no idea that's what they thought about me, and or like, you know, that's what they're saying about me behind my back. They come across so polite and nice. And so in a business setting, you're like, you're not allowed to go to certain places, or you're not allowed to talk to certain people. You're not allowed to work with certain brands, and they don't tell you why, and it comes out later. I feel that's like way more dangerous. But I don't know, like, I don't know if you've ever seen that, or that's something you've experienced with, and how, like, how would you, I guess, like, because you talk about this all the time, and like you said, you've had lots of people on your podcast to talk about this. What about, like, you know, to people who are experience like silent racism is what I call it. I don't know what it's called, but, you know, what would you advise there? Like,
well, I think that thank you for sharing that particular perspective. I think America, I've never been to London to be able to speak it from empirical evidence for myself firsthand. But certainly, America has a good dose of both, to be honest with you, in terms of just covert and overt racism. And I think honestly, I think that's a part of the issue as why racism is still very much rampant in America, because people only see racism as the overt things. It's like, if they're not burning crosses and calling you all types of, you know, niggas and things like that to your face, then that's what racism is. So if that doesn't exist, if that's not what's happening, then it's not racism. So then all these other microaggressions and these very these kind of broad stroking acts of racism that people just don't agree on, that is racism, kind of happens right in front of our faces all the time. What I believe we all can do is be able to call those things out, be able to have that discourse, because the thought process around them has to be spoken out loud. If we continuously allow for certain covert and like undercover things to happen, then essentially they'll continue. Because
there's no proof in some situations, right? So it could just be the way someone's acting, and I've seen this happen a lot, right? And some people just go, "Oh, they're being racist." I was like, you don't know that. You have no idea what they're thinking. They just might not like me, like, you know, I don't know. But they're like, "Oh, no, did you not hear that comment?" I was like, it could be racist, but it also could just be something completely different. They might not like the fact that I'm a woman. They might like the fact that I'm, you know, I've got a yellow shirt on, like we both do today. But like, you know, they might not like anything. The fact that I support a certain football team, like, you don't know. And so if you call them out on that, then you're seen to have a chip on your shoulder, or like, you know, you're playing this race card or whatever. And then again, you're the bad person for doing that and accusing people of racism when they're not being racist. So there's that difficulty, and I think that's what makes it hard. No,
it is. I think it is what makes it hard. I feel like personally, I think I've always had because I'm from the South. So there's a different flavor when you're talking about racism in the way that I kind of perceive it. And microaggressions are something that is very real. And I think in the South, a lot of people have the misconception that everywhere you go in the South, it's just, you have to, you know, watch your back and, you know, not go in the same spaces as white people and It's not that at all. There's a very understood sense of separation. And that sense of separation isn't as visceral as in other parts of America. In the South, there's a whole lot of cross, you know, kind of inhabitants and like cohabitation. Like, Black and white people interact a lot more probably in the South than they do in a lot of other places.
Wow.
Yeah, because they've understood that I already know you don't like me.
Just deal with it. That's it. They're just like, right, we don't like each other, but we'll just live together, and that's fine.
And a lot of situations, and because they interact with it, there's a lot of situations where there's a blissful ignorance. Like, I live in Chicago, Illinois now, and it's certainly one of the most, you know, it's definitely a diverse city, third largest city in the nation, but it's extremely separated. And so there's people literally on the north sides of Chicago who've never been to my side of town. Like, never been to my neighborhood. And it's not like it's hard to get to. It's not like it's far. We're talking about 10, 15-minute drive. And they've never been. And some of them have been living here for decades. And they've never been to a certain part of town. So there's a blissful ignorance that comes with it. While in the South, there's no ignorance at all. They'll have assumptions. They'll have opinions. They'll interact with other Black people with those assumptions and with those opinions. But I don't know where the Klan is. I don't know where these particular neighborhoods are. They're not that out loud with it. And I don't have any inclination as to even where to go to find those specific type of overtly racist people. So most of the time we're all interacting with people who have some type of covert racism. Also I think we have to also all admit and get on the same level that this is an institutional and social construct. So it's not a matter of buying in or opting into the behavior. It's not this situation of like, oh, I went to the racism workshop, so I now know how to torment Black people on my day-to-day basis. No, it's literally something that's indoctrinated. It's certain things that people don't want to claim to be racist in terms of like governmental systems and so many other, social things that we do, but it is. The fact that I have, long locks and you already have preconceptions about them. You already have this weird ass intrigue to wanting to touch them. What do you think that stems from? You see what I'm saying?
I'm laughing because I know that this has happened. Like I went on a holiday with my friends and we went to Georgia, not Atlanta, Georgia, but Georgia, the country. So it's like near Turkey. And so they've never seen Black people before. And they were like, just staring at us like we were like these weird circus freaks. And they were just like, oh my God. And people always ask, can I touch your hair? And I'm like, what the hell? Like, like, it's like candy floss. And I'm like, oh my God, just leave my hair alone. And it's like a thing. And she always has different hairstyles and it's so funny. And I'm just like, it's mental. But you're right. But as I said it earlier, everyone judges people. Everyone does. So like we're talking about racism one way here, but there's racism in every way. I think this is a thing. Like I don't know if you've seen the musical Avenue Q. Have you seen that?
I haven't.
It's huge in the US as well, like, but it's in the UK. It's just like a Muppets kind of thing, but they have this really funny song. It's like basically Muppets for adults is what I'd describe the show as.
That makes sense.
So it's like kind of on PC in some bits too, which is really funny. But there's a song called "Everyone's a Bit Racist Sometimes," and it's so true because, like, whilst again, I feel like we can sit here and preach that everyone's racist, but like also there's been times that we would definitely judge people by race and like build into stereotypes. And I think that definitely does happen. You're judged, like I said, because of your hair or whatever, the way you talk. And I think that that totally happens. And I think we're all guilty of it. I think, again, like I said, for me, it's like, I don't mind, but like I get that people could be racist and judge me a certain way, but once you get to know me, I'd like to hope you don't stick to that thing. And I think that's what's really important. And I find this with business, and I find it really hard as a business owner because at the moment I'm trying to find a mentor. And I'd like to find a mentor who's I requested from a mentor service, I'd like someone who's either female or someone of color, because like there's very few female people of color, so I wanted like at least one or the other to understand the sexism and racism that I get on a weekly basis, and people don't realize it's that often. But I would like to, and I think that in some ways you would get it more than I would, because like, for example, I know this from like my brother. I think he gets treated a lot worse than I would, because for some reason I don't know why, but women are it's not as bad towards women. I from my experience, what I've noticed. So I'd like to understand, because you started your own business and you started it during a pandemic, which is also kind of mental. How do you think being a Black man has affected your ability to win clients or like do business and the judgment that you may get, and do you feel like you have to work harder and prove yourself more to like to prove that you can do things, or like what's your experience been like?
Honestly, it was really something I had to just stick to, and I think those same thoughts came to my mind, like, why would I start this now? Should my exit strategy be extended? And I stuck with my guns, and I feel like I'm starting to really garner the rewards from that time, from that commitment, from that sacrifice, because it is a sacrifice that you're making. And when you're talking about distancing yourself from something that you understand and that everyone else understands around you. A lot of people don't understand why you want to work for yourself, because it's like, what do you mean? Like, there's money right there that somebody else can give you, and they have all these infrastructure, these things. Like, just work for somebody. Just go work for somebody.
But they're never gonna succeed as entrepreneurs. So they're just not the right people anyway, right? So you
know what I'm saying? And I think more than anything, the idea of working for people was something that I had to distance myself from. I work with companies all day, but I'm not going to have some sense of dominion over me, some dominance over me and the choices that I make. That's something that I really wasn't aligned with. And I've always been that way. I've always known before I even got into corporate America that I've always wanted to be my own boss. I always wanted to be the person who drew my own destiny out. So yeah, I started it and stuck with it and called in a lot of favors to a lot of my friends to kind of help me with the particular construction of particular processes and infrastructure of my business to be able to, you know, sell it to the people that I believe I could sell it to. When it comes to being a Black man and being a business owner, I think there's definitely a matter of ego when you're talking about mentorship. There's a matter of why help you? You're a man. You're supposed to just be able to get this off the mud and all these different things, as well. That's an assumption that's made. So there isn't this quick sense of like, I don't look like a damsel. I'm not in distress. And I definitely don't present that way in a natural sense. I think I'm a pretty put together person. So I don't seem so helpless. And that was something that I had to learn, is that I had to be very clear to people around me and various people that could possibly help me and help me push up my business, that had to be very clear, like, hey, I need you for this. I really need you for this. I'm not coming in this way of like, tell me what you think and hopefully you can just suggest something for me. No, I need you to help me with this. And you have to be very clear about those things, because if you don't, no one really ever will. No one ever really will come to save men specifically, especially if you're a Black man that seems like you kind of have certain things together. The people who know me and I think folks around me never really doubt certain choices that I make, because I'm not the type of person who they've seen to like, quote unquote, fuck up all the time. Mm-hmm. So it's like, why rush to his aid? Why rush to help him if it doesn't seem like he really needs help? People rather help people that they rather see helpless than people who seem like they have it together.
That's so fascinating. You've just like opened up my eyes to the fact that, like, you know, there's always like gender bias and everyone's talking about, oh, women have it harder or whatever. But actually, you've just flipped that on its head completely. And the fact that, you know, there's lots of people out there probably are willing to help women because they feel like they're more helpless or they won't succeed as much. But actually,
which can be patronizing. Crazy. Which can be patronizing in certain ways, because you literally may just want a particular. I think a lot of women may just want a particular thing. They don't want to be seen as these damsels either. But I think that could be for so many different motives. You kind of have to assess what's the motive of you helping me versus anything. You may be trying to gain something from me that isn't professional or whatever it is. That's something that a lot of women have to deal with as well, that I don't think men have to deal with on a regular basis. When I have a conversation with any client that just happens to be a woman and also attracted to men, I never sit there and question like, she's trying to date me. She's trying to kind of backdoor this situation and get some extra time with me. I never think that, you know, and those things have happened in the realm of my podcast. That energy I've learned over time, like, oh, you didn't want to just be on my show. You
really?
Know? Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
Now you've got me really paranoid about all the messages I'm getting. Just like
I'm just letting you know, be ready. You know what I'm saying?
I've had so many random LinkedIn messages since my podcast has come out, and I'm just like, they're like, oh, do you do podcasts in person? And now I get how you're making me paranoid.
Look. I applaud my mom for always acknowledging that that I had a nice voice, but my friends have reminded me over the years of doing my podcast. That's what made me finally get out my own way and get onto YouTube. It's like, Rodney, you don't look bad. You're like, you don't look bad. You're not a radio voice.
You're not a radio voice, exactly.
You're not a
radio face.
Yeah, you don't have a radio face. So you might want to get on there, because that might really send your stuff up. And I was like, I'll take it. But for me, it's been an interesting journey. And if anything, I lean into those things. If I can get into spaces and use my charisma for whatever you believe this intention is, at the end of the day, I'm here for business. So either we're gonna do business or we're not. So if you're giving me the time of day because you think I'm cute, then okay. But I see that where I can help you, and that's really what I'm here for. But that's really been the only thing. It's like, for me, it's been just a journey of like, you got it, you'll figure it out. When I really would love for it to be people just consistently hitting me up, consistently being like, hey, do you need this? Do you need that? Hey, I'm sending somebody your way. Hey, I know someone. And that's because I know it's happening. I know I know my business is one that's objective enough that a lot of people can use my services. You know, I'm giving out, you know, digital marketing assistance and creative production. People are, like we said, people are making podcasts all the time, and people are certainly starting businesses all the time. So how in the hell is my phone not ringing off the hook? You know, that's what you can feel. That's what you can, like, you know, your mind can sit there and tell you. It's like, I know enough people, I have enough friends. I know they're having conversations with other people about the things that they're doing. How in the hell aren't they giving them my card every day? You know, just like, hey, I know somebody you should call. I know somebody you should talk to. And they do that. I'm not shaming my friends for not doing that. I think that's just that's the process that you go through in your mind, at least depending on what it is that you're into. But especially if you go into it without having a particular networking community. And I think for me, because I feel like so much, like half of my time in the podcast industry, I wasn't able to commit to networking in the way that I wanted to. So once and that was a big motivator to finally leave the corporate space that I was in, because it wasn't even adjacent to what I wanted to do. There'd be one thing if I'm like a book editor and I would really love to be an author and I really would love to be published. At least I'm in the room. At least I'm in the realm of the things.
Yeah, it's a natural transition, right?
It's a natural transition. Yeah. I know people. I'm in the mix. Yeah. I know who the movers and shakers are of this particular industry. I was so far away from my own industry that I would live, and that was what drove my own motivation, because I'm going to networking events or meeting people out and just for drinks or mixers and whatever. And I'm casually breezing through what I do for a living to tell them what I really want them to know about me. You know, I do. This is my 9 to 5, but hey, let me let you know about, you know, this and that. And I do this and that, and, you know, and it usually works. It usually worked because we can kind of just go into this tangent about that, and what my 9 to 5 is really won't matter after a while. But I think for me, I always felt the way about that. Like, I always felt the way that I just couldn't lead with me and lead with, hey, this is what I do. And I want you to, you know, let that be known. If we can collaborate or do whatever, there you go.
So I think, like, it's funny because when you're talking now, making me think about the whole like gender bias thing, and everyone's always talking about it the other way around, but actually now I'm like appreciating it from the man's perspective, thinking, but it shows you like we're talking about race and like how everyone's in their own head about thinking a certain way. And now I'm saying I'm a woman, and I have always thought, oh yeah, the women are technically treated worse in general. But you know, you mentioned this now, and I'm thinking, you know, I think there's a lot of opportunities out there for women now, because people are trying to deliberately create those opportunities because they felt that women are disadvantaged. Don't get me wrong, in lots of circumstances. They are treated differently in circumstances as well. Yeah. But what would your advice be to, say, a young Black man who wants to become an entrepreneur, wants to start his own business, but naturally scared of it? Because there's a lot of people out there that I've come across who, you know, I've also tried to mentor as well. And they're sort of like, you know, they're scared. They want to do their own thing, but they're scared of how they might be perceived or how they're like portrayed, and they won't think they're going to be successful, so they don't do it. What would be your advice to any of those young Black men out there who want to start their own company?
I would say don't be afraid to try and fail, first off, because you're gonna learn certain things. Especially if you're starting without a mentor, you're starting without particular professional help. Do as much research as you can, honestly, about what it is that you feel like you need to make your business into a thing. Don't overinvest. Never overinvest in yourself. Just invest in yourself. You got to do that at some point in time, but never put so much into you, because 9 times out of 10, something's going to not really curl over. You're not going to get the return on every single thing that you do. So if you do that in surplus, then you're going to be mad after a while. Because like, damn, I could have used that money for this. I could have used that money for that. I just spent money on something and now I don't even need. You maybe bought a subscription for some type of digital service to help you with this, and you realize that's not even a viable thing, you know, for your business in terms of a marketing perspective or whatever it is. Do the research. Do not fall for any of these get rich quick methods, which I think is really attractive at first when you start entrepreneurship, because as soon as you start doing research, you know, because of Big Brother, you're going to get them cookies. They're getting your cookies. So you're going to start getting, you know, are you a new business owner? You know, YouTube ads and Facebook ads and all these different types of things. Do not lean into those things. You're going to end up wasting your time and wasting money. It's better to make actual connections with real people. Go and invest in real business consultations. Go and invest in real actual workshops and seminars and certificates for whatever it is that you do. Because the fact of the matter is, as an entrepreneur, you're an entrepreneur because you're literally wearing multiple hats. You're not doing just one thing. Even if all you do is sell t-shirts, you're not just a person who prints up and designs and sells t-shirts. You're also the accountant. You're the CFO, you're the CEO, you're the COO, you're the marketing executive,
HR,
you're all those things.
Legal, everything.
You're everything. So take those things and think about what it is that you fall short in. And lean and invest in that. So if you know for a fact you're not good with money, you're not good at budgeting and all these particular things, take a course. There's free things out there. You don't really understand these things in terms of just how to manage these aspects of your business. Really lean in and see who you know, especially if you don't have the community. If you have the community, if you know enough people, if your dad or your whoever, your dad or mom or whoever it may be in your family that has already done it, lean in on them. Do not be that prideful person to be like, I want to do it without them. That's stupid. We got to get away from that. Because nepotism has only been a terrible thing because we've seen it work against us. But in reality, it can work for us when it can work for us when it's a situation that's right there in our hands. So I as Jaden Smith won't talk to my dad because he's Will Smith and I want to get it on my own. That's stupid. Yeah. And also too, you have no control over how the world will treat you. Yeah. Because you can sit here and say all day that, hey, John David Washington is a great actor, but his dad is still Denzel.
Yeah, exactly. He's never going to get away from that.
You're never going to get away from that. So regardless if you change your name or go by a different moniker or make it seem like you're not related to whoever you're related to, everyone knows that is your father. Yeah. And the last thing they want to do is be on the, shit list for Denzel Washington or Will Smith or whoever your famous
and they're
family
two pretty
is.
Respected people as well. Like, why would you detach yourself from that? Use it to your advantage. I think like use anything. And when you're an entrepreneur, you should use absolutely anything you can to your advantage. And there's nothing to, like you mentioned earlier about looks and stuff. Like you said that people think you're cute, but use things to your advantage. That's why I feel like people who have a go at like influencers or attractive women, and they're like, look at them. All they're doing is putting themselves in a bikini or putting some makeup on and posing. And I was like, that's their skill. They are very attractive women and that helps them sell. Why is it a bad thing? Like, say if someone's really intelligent, they're using that as a skill. Like, why is it different in that sense? Like, it's just you use what resources you've got at your disposal. So I feel bad that people criticize women all the time. They're just hypocrites, really, in that sense, because sex sells, always has done. People judge people from how they look. People are still shallow. This is just how they are. So I think that when you're an entrepreneur, you need to do anything you can to get by. So I think that's great advice and I love it. And I think that I know that there'll be loads of people out there who probably want to hear from you. So how can our listeners get in touch with you? Like, where can they find you? Social media, website? Where's the best place people can get hold of you?
Yeah. And also, every type of entrepreneur have a routine, like a morning routine, a night routine. It'll make you more sane. For me, you can follow my own personal page where it's kind of the hub of all the types of content and things that I do at Kings_Memoirs. That's on IG and every other social media platform. You can follow my podcast on IG and on Facebook at the Simply King Pod. And also my business page. You can follow my business page on IG at Life as King. That's Life as King. And you can you can check out my services, reach out to me and all those different things through my website, www.lifeasking.com. Yeah.
Amazing. I'm going to drop all those links in the show notes anyway, so people can follow you and reach out to you. But so I mean, there's been some absolute gems in this pod today, and I think that you've obviously got so much more to give. So I feel like loads of people are going to want to hit you up after this. So I just want to say a massive thank you for being on today's show and for taking time to share.
Massive.
So what would the American version be? That I don't know. What would you guys say? Big thanks. Is that right?
Big thanks. I like big. I say big a lot. Big is definitely in my lexicon often. Big everything. So yes, big thanks. I like that. Big thanks equals massive. I like that. I just love how I love language. So I just love how everything can flip, It's beautiful.
Well, big thanks for coming on today. And I can't wait for listeners to hear this, and I will definitely hit you up soon as well for a follow-up to see how everything's going. But thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks everyone for listening, and I'll see you guys next week for another episode of No Bullshit Talks.